Yeah, pictures.
Oh, no, this is from the thing. You'll see it. Like, is that the wedding in the middle?
We didn't know the language. We just barely knew this guy and no money. And
I know.
yeah. Do you ever watch that Roots shows? You know, Alex, his name, you know, where he goes back in people's ancestry, and they talk about our ancestors doing that.
Right.
They're still doing it.
Yeah. Yeah. Ancestry.com is really cool. You got it right. It's Root. Yeah, I want to do that. My grandpa did it. And then he
Oh, you're
stopped.
talking about the guy. Yeah, I love that show.
Same here.
Isn't it Alex?
Finding your group.
Yeah, finding your group.
Yeah, it's yeah, it's a good show.
And then at the end, they check out DNA.
No, here's the thing, when they unroll your family, and it's like,
Yeah.
You want to get past some of the started. He said, I don't know, I think it's supposed to be something. And I said, Donna, they just like regular people sometimes. I just.
Yeah. Oh, I did see that, they just, a nurse and some other ladies that they went back.
They people wrote in letters and then I picked a couple.
But we were
That
so
was
ended
because we all had it.
Right, everybody has a
Right.
story.
because we didn't
There used to be a show on TV, I don't know if you remember, it was like a 60-minute thing. But every week the guy would open up a phone book from somewhere and just name.
Oh, yes.
And then go visit that person.
Yes.
You
On
met-
the road.
Yeah.
And they would just go and hear their story.
Charles Carroll.
Yeah.
On the
Just
road.
pick a
And
name.
he was in an RV. He was in a big
Yeah,
RV.
let's show.
I gotta go to the internet. I'm YouTube. I know. Bring your.
Do you know what's Charles too?
He's a live camera.
So,
Yes.
yes.
He was at the, retreat there.
You're being live.
So Chris.
Where's the camera?
And he says he's gonna do
She went, she found out she had cancer.
And,
From a very,
We're looking
nice front yard.
guy that
Where would
Masons,
see
he
her?
does these women's boys.
Tell me if you can see
Right
me.
there.
It could be this right here.
Let me look and see if he put
It starts right here. So
It's live streaming for her family in another country, so just know people are watching that.
well, one person.
birthday was just there.
Wait, where's the camera? Do you see me? Do you see me? Oh,
You're gonna be entertaining with
That's-
Jax. Don't touch it.
there it is. That's the camera. Should we adjust it so that way they can see Janine?
Yeah.
And right there
And I probably saw him on Weekly Tracy's side.
Last week.
Yeah, I know. So that was quick.
She's a. Or one side, or one's like it's not made.
Oh.
But no, it's the.
You know, in the neighborhood, you just want to be
So this one just says.
It's on the table.
Yeah, what they remember. Blueberry lemonade.
I know I asked him, and he said, I like that. I really like to say a lot about it. That's why I was like, I asked she how she was doing.
But.
So, Started on October 9th. 3 days later. Yeah, I love it. The kids love it. They get excited when they see him. They get so excited when they see him. I'm like, hey guys, do this. He loves it. He's an awesome guy. He's about when he comes from the high in India. They're coming very soon.
This is my
But she was really close to her nephew. Which is why they moved to where they live.
Oh, that's why.
Yeah, he was out of the thing, so. Yeah. We don't ever see her unless it's like a special event or something. So, we like to have a lot of yeah, but yeah, so.
They're mad because they would.
I think I've met her like. He always makes sure that we're not like together. He's like, okay, guys, get our picture together. He's like, all right.
Best case, you guys had there, you can stay in. You was caught, okay, so you still wait. That's our first time doing this since then.
Okay. Really? I've never heard of
I had a little thing that I was gonna bring up. You remember years ago when we covered those dining room chairs?
Yeah.
You don't still have them, do you? What's the dish Nancy brought over and you took? Because I had a whole pile. You don't remember what it was? Fabric, roasted fabric. When I someone got it was the garage sale.
Yeah, so I think I remember, yeah. No, but I have to get it now. But I can take, I can still. Oh,
Yeah.
I'll show you how hard. It's not hard. Show me how to do it. I did that one.
None of the ones that
Oh, thank you.
We'll stay there.
Okay.
That's not like on
It's fine. You still get it. I do not do that, but I'm right. You know what, Janine? Here, this is Janine. I'm not gonna feel sorry for her. I think she's in a better place.
Absolutely. 100%.
Good afternoon, folks. I'm only using the microphone to keep it a little bit formal. But before we start, if everybody wants to reach into their pockets and or purses and make sure that their cell phones are either off or muted. I'm now going to turn everything over to celebrant Brian Bennett to honor Janine and Dawn. Thank you.
Well, as Erica said, good afternoon, everyone. It's just an honor to be able to be with you all here today. I had the honor of saying a few words when Don passed here a while back, and so got to meet Janine at the time. And like Steve said, even though today's a very hard day, I know it's also the end of a couple, 3 years of a pretty hard struggle for Janine. So there's some blessing with that, isn't there? And I think in 30 years that I've been doing this, this is the first time I've ever done a live celebration with someone with sparkly suit and shoes. So today's the first. I would love to hear, is this a Halloween thing?
So I was told it's Janine style. So.
That's awesome. I thought that might be the case. That is awesome. And I know that this is a very special gathering. I told Steve, I just think it's so special that you guys are making sure this happens. I know there's a lot of weird connections on how all your lives crisscrossed, and I'm a big believer in something that I refer to as holy collisions. And what I mean by that is exactly why many of you are here. I think sometimes in life, when we're lucky enough, we run into the exact right person at the exact right time for the exact right reason that we were supposed to run into that person. You might be sitting next to one of your holy collisions right now. You think back, because in our busy lives, the odds are set up against us recognizing them when they happen. But every now and then we see someone and when there's something special there, there's a connection there. And we have to push through all the layers of acquaintance and friendship to eventually turn into the significant relationship that it ends up. And whenever I have the privilege to do a service like this, I consider this group in this chapel on this Friday, we're really our own version of a holy collision. You can never plan for this group of humans to be at the same place at the same time. And yet here we are. And when we parked our cars a little bit ago, we all had things we're worried about. We have decisions we're trying to make. There might be something going on in your life that nobody else in the room even knows about. And they're going to be waiting for us when we get back in our cars and rejoin our busy lives. So my hope and prayer today is that by the time we go back to our own lives, we're going to have a little bit deeper appreciation and walk with a little bit of the spirit that Don and Janine brought into this life with them. And to me, that's the best way to celebrate someone's life. I love the transition that we've seen in the last decade, because we've gone from calling these memorial services and funeral services to life celebrations. And in a life like theirs, there's a lot to celebrate. And that's exactly why we're here today. A very wise person once said, it's okay to miss them. It's okay to continue to say their name often. It's okay to cry. It's okay to laugh. It's okay to breathe deeply. It's okay to smile when you think of them. It's okay to have days when you can function, and it's going to be okay to have days when you just can't. It's okay to be angry. It's okay to be thankful. It's okay to remember. It's okay to hope. It's okay to be honest about how you're feeling. And the best thing to know is it's going to be okay. I'm sure that at the time that Janine lost Don, it didn't feel like it was going to be okay. But on a day like today, we can celebrate knowing that they are back together again, just exactly as they belong to be. And I love that reading because it acknowledges that everybody faces grief differently. I loved it when Steve told me that many of you were going to bring something that reminded you of Janine, and then in a moment or so, we're going to give you guys the chance to share some of those stories. She had 9 decades of a story, and you guys are the pages and chapters of that story, however you came into their lives. And so with that said, I would like to stop talking for a little bit And I'm gonna get out of the way. I know several of you have brought some things to remind you of a story. You can either come up here if you want to, you can stand where you're at. We're just gonna kind of let this time go. If you feel led to say something, share a memory, then please do that. So who would like to go first?
Well, Don and Janine, we all have many memories of Don and Janine celebrating Christmas, all of us, together. And they always got us real nice gifts. Nothing huge or anything, but I put this out every year at Christmas, and I always think of Don and Janine. So, and I have other ones at home, but this one I just love this one. It's so pretty. So I'll just leave it out.
Thank you.
I should have brought my little thing.
Okay, I think we could all say many things about Don and Janine. And probably in the last 10 years, I got to know Janine more, because in the early years, Janine would come and sit and talk to my mom or talk to Loopy, or, they would kind of be there, and I would talk to Don more than I would Janine. Just that's kind of the dynamic it was. And then when Don passed away, I got to know more of her story, which is a pretty amazing story. They could make a movie about, how she was born in France and all the stuff that went on. And her language, sometimes it was hard to understand her. And one of my favorite times was a story, and I remember we look over and there's little Jared, and he's just looking up at Adam. He's going, Adam, what's a squeezer? And if you knew her, she was saying, hi, sweetheart. And Jared just like, what is a squeezer? And that pretty much sums it up, and she was very headstrong. God love you, and we will miss you both.
Okay.
Of all the things between Don and Janine that I think of the most is that independently they were strong, but together they were super strong. They always had each other's back. Janine thought somebody did Papa John wrong. Don't ask her. Make sure you treat him right. He did the same for her. And I remember meeting Papa John. It was not only did Papa Don as my boss at McDonald's when I was in high school. And then he would take us out because he started a softball team at McDonald's. Do you remember that, Steve?
No.
So, maybe it's working, but he would take us out and when I tell him, he said, hey, he was thirsty. And I'm like, oh, I think I would drop bottle of water. He goes, no, here, it's in my trunk. He opened up his trunk. It was like a bar on wheels. So, okay, this guy's awesome.
So were you guys underage?
No.
Okay.
So he also introduced me to strawberry daiquiris. And he would make his own strawberry daiquiris homemade that do not light a match or anything. But it's delicious. It was whatever you don't tell Janine. It's okay. So then he introduced us to Janine and we started to bowl together. I bowled with Lee for many years and became very competitive, but became friends before the kids were born, Melissa, Tony, and they were then introduced as Papa Don and Auntie Janine. Like Papa Don and Janine. So my children grew up with them, their grandparents all their life. And they always loved them, always. Even when they took them camping, and the kids, I asked them, do you want to go back camping again, Papa? And they're like, no. They're very protective of them. They wouldn't want to do much, but I understand why. They're precious. They didn't want anything to happen to them. And they introduced kids to spinach biscuits and eating different things at Christmas time. I know Janine and Don traveled the world, brought back numerous treasures, just beautiful things. We're very proud of who they were and where they traveled to and all the friends they had. And later on in their years, they would camp. They had their RV. And they talked about all the many friends they had along the way camping as well. And they were just genuinely very, very nice people that if you were kind to them, they were kind right back to you. And they became just a part of our family. And we miss them, but I knew when Papa Don left us that Janine was going to be very lonely. And when Janine left us, I was somewhat relieved because I knew at that time she was going to be with her sweetheart. And they would be together. So God bless them and thank you for sharing your life with us. Thank you.
Anyone else want to share? Well, I'm sure there are lots and lots and lots of Janine stories, and I would encourage you to keep telling them, keep sharing them. You know, the hardest part, we just mentioned, Christmas is coming up. And that's the weird thing about grief is you think you're past something and you think you're doing okay, and then all of a sudden, out of nowhere, something will hit you. And my encouragement is when those times happen, you just stop doing whatever you're doing and let that moment do whatever that moment is supposed to do. So I think it's great that you have these memorabilia. I think it's great that you wore the suit, because that's what keeps a person's story alive. You know, when Steve told me pretty much in detail about her childhood, and it is like a Netflix story. Somebody should be buying the movie rights to her story. And what that told me, because I get to listen from a very different perspective, I didn't get to know them. And so I always love to hear a person's story and wonder what makes a person tick. You know, what makes them the way that they are. She didn't have a choice but to be a fighter from day one. You know, they are a part of a generation that, without exaggeration, is called the greatest generation. And there's fewer and fewer of those great people left. And there was a spirit of loyalty, patriotism, grit that simply does not exist at that level today. I know that Don had a long career in the military, and I don't think in our country we do a good enough job of saying thank you to those who have served us. And so if that's any of you, on behalf of all of us and to Don, please know, thank you. But no military person would be who they are without their wing person behind them. And it sounds to me like Janine was the perfect wingman for her husband. I heard the story of how she kind of had to escape to America for them to rejoin. They had met, and you talk about a holy collision. Not only were they supposed to meet, but they were supposed to spend the rest of their lives together. And it's truly a powerful story. I got to hear how much they just love spending time together. We just got to hear more of that. And not only where they meant to be married, but it sounds like they were actually friends. They liked each other. It's one thing to love each other, it's another to like each other. And how your families intertwined and came to know each other and really became kind of like an adopted family. I do this a lot. I get to hear a lot of stories. This is one of the most unique ones I ever heard, to go ahead and push through and make sure that a life celebration for both of them is happening. And it just means a lot. And I talked to Steve, I remember from Don's time that while not religious, they were spiritual. And they had a belief system that this life is only chapter 1, and there is a second chapter that they believed in very much. I know the last few years, Steve had told me that she really struggled with memory issues. And I think if you've ever had to love on someone who's going through Alzheimer's or dementia, I'm not sure there's anything tougher on this side of heaven, to be honest. Remember when I was in high school, I didn't grow up in a church, but I was part of this local youth group. And every Wednesday night, we went up to a local nursing home about 20 minutes away. And we each had an adopted grandparent or two that we visited every time we went there. And my adopted grandma was a lady named Charlotte. And I knew her for 2 years. And back then, they didn't use the terms dementia and Alzheimer's as much, but the symptoms were the same. And I loved going to visit Charlotte because you never knew what was going to come out of her mouth. She had been the first lady at one point. She was part of the royal family. She had dated Elvis, according to her. And then every Wednesday night when I was there, from 6:30 to 7, the old television show MASH was always up on the TV in her room. And every time this character played by McLean Stevenson came on the screen, she would tell me that was her nephew. I mean, just story after story after story. Well, I knew her for about 2 years, and her health was failing. And on one of the last Wednesday nights, I went up to see her. And I kid you not, I walked in her room, McLean Stevenson was sitting next to her in a chair because he really was her nephew. And then I was like, well, what was Elvis like? Now I don't know what to believe, what not to believe. And I tell you that, I'm not a medical expert, and I don't really know how all the layers of the memory stuff works. My sense is that they can't always get out what they want to get out. But I have zero doubt that what you've all done to stay in, there are just times when the clouds part and they know it. And God bless you all for that. And if you have someone in your life now that's struggling with that, keep the visits going. Keep playing the old music. Keep sharing the old stories, because you just don't know. But the beautiful thing to know is, because of their belief, is that they are in a place now where there are no memory issues. There's no heart issues, there's no cancer, there's no COVID, there's no presidential elections, thank God. They're in a place where they get to be reunited, not only with each other, but with all the people in their lives they've had to say goodbye to. And if you share that belief today, on any level, then you don't have to say goodbye to these two sweet people. You can simply say, and mean it, Donna, Janine, we will see you later. I lost my mom a few years ago to cancer, and that phrase is on her tombstone. We'll see you later. And in this world, that I believe that brings a lot of comfort to know that there is a second chapter. I would like to close my time with you with a reading that I hope brings honor to the way that Don and Janine lived their lives. She gave this one afternoon to a group of college graduates at Villanova University. It's one of the most powerful things I've in honor of Don and Janine and their lives. And I quote them and said, you walk out of here today with the only one thing that no one else has. There will be hundreds of people out there with your same degree. There will be thousands. But you will be the only person alive who has sole custody of your life. Your particular life, your entire life. Not just your life at a desk or your life on a bus or in a car or at the computer. Not just the life of your mind, but the life of your heart. Not just your bank account, but your soul. People these days don't talk about the soul very much anymore because it's much easier to write a resume than it is to craft a spirit. But a resume is a cold comfort on a winter night, or when you're sad or broke or lonely, or when you've gotten back the test results and they're not so good. So she said, here's my resume. I've been a good friend to my husband. I try to make my marriage vows mean what they say. I show up, I listen, and I try to laugh. I'm a good friend to my friends, and they are to me. Without them, there would be nothing to say to you today, because I would simply be a cardboard cutout. So I call them on the phone when I can. I meet them for lunch. I show up, I listen, and I try to laugh. I would be rotten at best mediocre at my work if those other things were not true, because you cannot really be first rate at your work if your work is all you are. So she said, here's what I wanted to tell you today. Maybe if these two could be standing where I'm standing, knowing what they know now, they would give us all the same life lesson. Get a life. Get a real life. Not just a manic pursuit of the next promotion or a bigger paycheck or a larger house. Do you think you care so very much about those things if you blew an aneurysm one afternoon or found a lump in your breast? Get a life in which you're not alone. Find people that you can love and people that will love you back. And remember that love is not leisure, it is really hard work. So pick up the phone, send an email, write a letter, kiss your mom, hug your dad. Get a life in which you were generous and realize that life is the best thing ever and we have no business taking it for granted. She said, I learned this many years ago because something really bad happened, something that if I had my choice would have never happened at all, but it has taught me the biggest lesson of my life. I have learned to love the journey and not the destination. I learned that this life is not a dress rehearsal, and today is really the only guarantee we get. So I tell everybody that I meet this advice. Consider the lilies of the field. Take the time to look at the fuzz on the back of a baby's ear. Read a book in the backyard with the sun shining in your face, and learn to be happy. And think of life as a terminal illness, because if you do, you will live it with joy and passion as it ought to be lived. And it sounds to me like you all got to have a holy collision with two people that live life the way that it ought to be lived. Life threw a lot at them, and they did the very best with it. And there's a lot we can learn and be inspired by as we go back to our own busy lives today. So thank you for allowing me to be part of this holy collision today. Thank you for being part of their lives and for all the stories. Continue to tell their stories. I'd like to close with a word of prayer, and then I'll turn it back over to Erica. Okay? Let's pray. God, I thank you so much for just allowing me the privilege to get to hear this amazing story. When you think about the circumstances, even that they met, I mean, I just wonder, what was that first conversation like? And yet somehow they stayed in touch and they created a life together, and then that life continued to cross paths with people like are in this room right now. And it sounds like they just made a difference wherever they went. So I pray that as we leave here today, we each have people that are watching how we do life, how we handle good times and hard times and all the times in between. So I pray that we can leave here today with their story ringing in our ears, and we can push through hard times, we can enjoy the great times, and realize that relationships are the most important thing on this planet. In your name we pray these things. Amen.
Folks, on behalf of the Routsong family, thank you all so much for coming and honoring Janine and Dawn this afternoon. I do ask that if anybody is going to the cemetery, we're not going to go in a formal procession, but you can follow me to the cemetery. The cemetery is in Centerville, right off of 48, or Far Hills Avenue as well, and that is my Philly Memory Gardens. So you folks can just follow me there, and we will have a committal service at the cemetery to lay both Janine and Dawn to rest. Thank you.